Gmove, and welcome to our today's episode with a very special guest, Coops, our co-founder of the movement ecosystem. Hey Coops, how are you today?
What's up? Great to see everyone.
Nice to meet you. Could you introduce us shortly into your Web3 journey? How did you come to crypto, and how did you find the movement language?
Oh man. So my story of like coming to crypto, it starts way before getting in where what kind of predisposed me to having an interest in crypto and Web3 was becoming very financially oriented because when I was growing up, I was taking care of myself, I was helping take care of my family. And so with regard to that, like I was bleeding out money, right? I was working full time during high school so that right to do that, and I would be taking an immediate like very significant percentage cut that was just going to right like helping my family pay bills and feeding myself and all of those things. So I was really interested in this idea of finance, that you could make money with your money. And so the idea of being able to take what I have, be able to turn it into something bigger, that could help get rid of that huge gap between what I actually had like post all of the necessary expenditures, and be able to find some more comfort. But I was never able to invest growing up. One, like the bank that I had, it's like not even like like I can't even do stuff with it. With a lot of apps, they're like, we don't recognize your bank. And I'm like, man. And even if they did, it's like most of the time I'd have like maybe like 20, $40 in my bank account, and that was just going to purchase pizzas because that would feed me like 3 meals, right? So like even if I wanted to invest, I wouldn't really be able to. And so when I got to college, two major things happened. So one of which was being exposed to technology and to coding. So I remember on my floor, people were complaining about their CS classes, and they're like, "Dude, I got like a 40% on this assignment," and I was like, and that was like good. I had never heard of such a thing before. I thought, if you do good on an assignment, you get like a higher percentage. And so when I started like learning about it more and found it really interesting, right? That combined with the internet, being able to plug into this global system where there's the saying on the internet, no one knows you're a dog, right? It's more just what you contribute is what is taken at face value. So it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter your background. What you present is what you can be. And so that kind of leads to so many more opportunities than what exist in other industries, where it's like, oh, you have to go to the best school and you have to have the best internship, and you have to, your dad has to golf at the country club where the VP works at if you want to get that kind of job. But with the internet, right, you can just show up, you can prove yourself, and more agnostically find and have opportunity. So the next piece of this happened over COVID. So they're trying to get everyone off campus, which is a very rare thing at the school I went to. Like you have to get married typically if you want to live off campus. Otherwise, they're like, no. But for this really special circumstance, people had the opportunity to. And I actually only went off campus because at the school, so there's like the new colleges that are like the new dorms, which are super nice. But if you're not in the new dorms, you're kind of sent to live in the ones that were built like 50 years ago and like have
Hmm.
mold and like are you don't want to go there.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I got sent to one of those. And so when we got the opportunity to live off campus, I didn't even know that there would be a lot of amazing opportunities in doing it. I just kind of went out of spite. I'm like, I am not living there. Get me out of here.
Yeah.
And it ended up being that since I wasn't paying for housing and I wasn't paying for a meal plan, my aid was higher than my charges. And the difference between those would just get direct deposited into my bank account every semester. And so that was, it was wild. It was more money than I had seen in the sum of my entire life, just put right into my bank account. I'm supposed to be like paying rent with this. I'm supposed to be like paying for food, but you know me, I was out here on Robinhood investing every penny of it. I was like, I'm gonna turn this into something bigger. I was I was gonna realize that dream that I had like in high school, but never could do because suddenly I had such a surplus. 'Cause that was supposed to last me like 6 whole months, you know.
Yeah.
So originally, I was going pretty ham on lithium. I was really interested in particularly things that I thought could have a pretty short term growth, where lithium I thought was pretty undervalued. It had a lot of opportunity. It was making a lot of waves. There's lots of rumors about it being used in like EVs and being used to power more electric things. So okay, I'm gonna bet on this. Just put all of the money there. So there's some points where I made money, points where I lost money, but after lithium had its day, I was kind of like, okay, what now? And there wasn't anything that I felt as confident in as I did in lithium. So for a while, it was just kind of like I was just on Wall Street's bets every day, just like I literally over Zoom classes, I was just refreshing Wall Street's bet. All right, boys, what's the next play? Where where are we going now? Um, and eventually, right, I came across this thing called crypto, and I'd heard about it, a bit before, kind of some of the OG use cases that folks are doing in college, but I never really paid too much attention to it. But then once Coinbase, right, it started becoming more popular, kind of democratized getting access to crypto for retail. What was really interesting about that is in the early days of Coinbase, there were like what, like 10, 15 assets listed. And so if you have this kind of like it kind of in effect is a choke point in which everyone from retail is coming and they're being sent to 10 or 15 different things. And so naturally, like anything in those early days that you would put money into on Coinbase would just, it went crazy over that coming bull cycle. And so, like many others, I okay, very interested in the finance. And then as I started to learn more about it, became pretty enamored by the technology. It's like, wow, being able to program information and particularly like program money and financial information is super, super cool and leads to a lot of new opportunities. So the first thing I was doing was actually like very apart from the market. I didn't want to be a part of the market because I knew like market's good now. By the time that I'm able to really build something, it might not be as good. So I wanted to create something that'd be a bit more agnostic and be able to survive a bear market. So I was building infrastructure with this VC firm where they're a fund of funds. And it was really cool to create structures where funds within their network, you could think of them as like nodes that could more easily raise, deploy capital, and have communication with each other. Where traditionally the VC space super illiquid, right? But with a token and being able to create like a private blockchain where you could KYC AML folks to onboard them, it'd be really cool, right? So we were building that out, and we were using Solidity because that was just like it's like the main language. But time and time again, like there's a lot of feedback about the language that it's not super safe. It doesn't make a ton of sense, and so I was researching other languages to use and came across the Move language because Aptos and Sui were making huge waves with their recent fundraisers over that summer. And as I started to learn about them, like it not only solved the pain point I was facing as a builder, but actually like could completely change the paradigm for how we create smart contracts, how we think about security, and enable so many more new use cases. And that's what really drew me to Move and drew me into this like Web3 proper industry, where it's namely this ability to create something novel, right? Where it's not like the airline industry, where if you want to break into the airline industry, these planes cost hundreds of millions of dollars. There's a very small number of people who actually manufacture these planes. Like it's very difficult to break into. But in Web3, it's such a dynamic market where it's innovating at the speed of now. It's a 24/7 industry, as well as how it's powered by the internet. And since on the internet, no one knows you're a dog, on the internet, no one needs to know that I'm a college dropout, right? If I can build something that people resonate with and build something that as a product can stand strong, then it can see adoption and I can see some form of success. So I became really enthralled by Web3 and this ability to like build my own seat at the table. And in building one of the first financial products with Move, I saw so much of like how blockchains go to market from the very start. And in that, I learned so much. And one of the main things that I learned is that if you want to bring something new to market, you face what's called a cold start problem. It's how do you start from zero? How do you gain adoption? And how do you reach that critical mass? And I think the answer to that question is that you need to have believers. You need to have supporters. So how do you create believers? How do you create supporters? There's a lot of belief in the way that Move came to market originally, coming from a Facebook background, coming from like their Libra project, where that's like that is just so elite. It's incredible. The folks who are behind this language and are bringing it to market, but that wasn't enough, right? It's critical to have support, not just belief, but support from a whole ecosystem of builders, of community members, of everyone. And so for that, like that's what inspired movement was that we can create a movement by creating frameworks and by creating structures in which people can confidently contribute to in the capacity that they so desire. They can sharpen their skill sets both by practice and by doing so with others who are within that same guild. And ultimately, just as like we're building our own seat at the table, at this point, we're building like a banquet hall. We're helping others build tables and helping others build seats at those tables now. So, really creating network effects of empowerment for people around the world. And that ties all the way back to when I was just like a super broke kid in the middle of nowhere, not knowing how I was going to get my footing in this world, right? This is something where it's designed like I still feel like that kid. So much has changed. I'm in such a different. So much has changed, but I don't feel like I have changed, and so it's really important to me to build an experience and build a go to market that is dedicated for people like me. And thinking of that, like myself when I was in high school at that stage, what I wish I had, and so that's what really inspired me, right, to come to Web3, to create movement, and for everything that we're doing now, right? I want to help others build their seat at the table. I want to create a system by which we all can win together, and I ultimately want to, like, I just want to help others, particularly people going through the situation that I was going through.
Okay, crazy story. I think you mentioned very lot important points. Maybe if I can summarize it a little bit. So I mentioned with Web3 you have very many possibilities. You have possibilities to join and work in areas which you maybe wouldn't in traditional markets or industries. And that's one part or one reason why I'm doing the Movecast. I want to show the incognito faces or the not known people behind those projects, because I think that's a quite important part to give the community some trust on the people behind the projects, which they maybe don't know or they didn't even see. But yeah, you also mentioned the importance of community. And what I actually had from the beginning, once I joined Movement, is that, as you said, experience on a community and of, let's say, a bigger purpose. So I from the beginning I had the feeling I can be part of it and I can really give an impact. And so I would be interesting, or for me, it would be interesting to know how or what is your vision of a perfect community, and maybe what challenges does such a community have to overcome?
Yeah, so I think to me what a perfect community looks like is a place where everyone can have a home, as well as a place where people can be recognized for their contributions. So in my own experiences, like when I was quite literally, like when I was a newbie, I was essentially like a community member of the Move language. I spent so much time writing about Move, so much time learning about it, so much time talking about it to my friends, convincing them to come build with me, right? Like I helped a few other folks drop out of college as well to come with me to build with the Move language. Right, within Move ecosystem, so many folks are helping others like debug their code, giving coding tips to others. I was talking to so many investors about the Move language, about its benefits. I was in every single pitch, right? I was talking to them about the Move blockchains that I was building on as well. I was out here, in social media talking about Move, right? So there's so many different things which I was doing that ultimately, if Move is ever going to see adoption, it requires hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people like me doing these exact things. But then when all was said and done, I had nothing to show for it, right? I got absolutely wrecked. Like it wasn't just like, oh, maybe a little bit. No, it was the other direction. I got destroyed. And that's just like ultimately not, it's not a scalable, it's not fair for community members, and it's not something that's going to promote and drive adoption. So for me, in a perfect world, like it's not just that, it's very clear for folks around the world to be like, okay, this is a track, this is a way that I can contribute. But it's also that there's things baked into the system that are going to recognize those accomplishments and recognize those contributions. And what's cool is that it can come from so many different places, right? There's some ways in which we as movement are recognizing others, right? This can be things like retweeting posts. It can be like making community guides kind of official guides for others. Community data rooms, things that put together as official resources that we direct people to. Because honestly, there's a lot of things that y'all do even better than us. So that's something where it's like we recognize that and we want to support that. We want to help others build their brands in our ecosystem. That can be such as like getting Discord roles is a very simple thing. But those Discord roles can tie to special opportunities and other future special recognitions and things as well. And those recognitions can come not just from us, but also like we're instilling this ethos into every single one of the applications and teams building on top of us, in which like if they want to succeed, they need to do that same thing, because it's ultimately kind of the system, right? It's game theory, where what's cool about Web3 is that if you don't like the game that's being played, you can go play your own game. You can go somewhere else. You can go play someone else, do another thing. And so ultimately, I think it's going to lead to a really high standard of quality, of community, of recognition for community across movement ecosystem. Because like if you're being well recognized by one application, naturally you're going to go there. You're not going to go to places that aren't properly recognizing you. And it's on us to give that framework. So it's been really cool to see the guerrilla movers emerge. Like it honestly, like it truly warms my heart. Is kind of like how life emerges, where you have all of these like necessary conditions from like all, like many different factors that come together for something to emerge purely organically, and for it to really like embody this ethos of the movement. Everything that I just described, like that is what guerrilla movers emerged from, and it's awesome seeing it resonate with every single member of this community, and seeing like these mechanisms of recognition and reward happening even internally on the community level. And so there's so much that we can learn from, so much that applications can learn from. And ultimately, like, I believe that a good system, right? It's like, it's very clear what plugs into where. And then there's very clear pipelines and pathways for how information flows, how recognition can be given. And then in the future, like, this becomes a framework for, if you're an application and you think to yourself, how do I onboard people that are truly going to engage with my platform? And there's so many different ways. People can make memes, people can make guides, they can be community moderators, make podcasts, make tweets and content, so many different things. What do I do? And we're like, well, we have guilds for that. And we can very strongly recommend folks. And those folks who have reputation within movement ecosystem can carry that over into applications that they're doing as well. So it's not just that it's very easy for someone to get onboarded, right? There's no interview process. We don't, right? You could, like, very well, half of the people could be dogs, right? No one knows you're a dog on the internet. And it's not our place to know, right? It's just our place to give a way that you can prove yourself and then be able to, like, in a streamlined way, have some form of, like, output for that given input. So then it also needs to be a common tide, right? We need to raise, the tide raises all ships. That it's not just something in which, like, oh, we're on our castle on the hill and we're up here. No, like, everyone needs to come with us, and it's actually this, like, moving together that enables us to go the distance. So I'd say those are the two biggest things that I think mark a successful community. One, that it's easy for people around the world to get plugged into, that it's a very agnostic and simple onboarding experience, and it's clear what they can do, how they contribute. And then the second part being that for those contributions, there's a way that that can be recognized. And there's a way that it's, after it's recognized, that you really follow through with those things. And it's honestly super cool to be building a blockchain because we can create network effects with it, where it can come from us, it can come from applications building on us, it can even come from our community, such as by the guerrilla movers, where this is kind of guerrilla. It's like the Harvard of movement community. Yeah.
Yeah, so I really like what you just said, because from my own experience, I can just approve or say it's as you have maybe designed or what your idea was. Because once I joined on Movement Discord, which was like in the beginning of the year, so I came from airdrop farming, seeing a lot of many different Discords, but I didn't see something that nicely designed. And as you said, with those guidelines, in which I feel comfortable and know, okay, now I have this, and this possibility. But yeah, so that was pretty nice to experience on the movement Discord. So yeah, what would me interest is, did you have some like influences or some experiences in your life before which gave you that idea or that vision of community? Did you read, I don't know, some books? Did you play games or whatever, which gave you that idea, how to form and build those guidelines for a successful community?
Yeah, man. I think it was a little bit of everything. So I am a huge gamer. I've always loved games and felt it to be very interesting the way that games can mirror reality, and that, like, it's inspired. So you can actually learn a lot about reality from the way that games are played. There's this concept of game theory. There's a really cool book called Infinite Games, where it's about defining what a game is and how there's different types of games, short term and long term ones. There's actually a lot that you can learn about life and even philosophy, kind of tying back to, like, thinking of, like, Marcus Aurelius's his meditations, where a lot of that, it's the way that he's thinking is of life as an infinite game. So there's so much to learn from it. And I think that games create a simple structure by which you can define variables and you can define an experience, where ultimately what we're doing here is creating an experience. for folks. That it's not like we're not here to just be, oh, we're a tech company, or oh, we're a finance company, or we're a security company. Like, this is something in which people are a part of. We're bringing a new language to market, right? So everyone has a place here, right? It makes me think of, like, I don't know, I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, so I'm thinking of like Move language, like Move is our dragons, and like Aegon went on this conquest. And within that, like, if you're going on a conquest, everyone has a place. And that's something that's very inspirational as well. You know, for example, some folks in my family were involved in the US military as well. And so that's something that's been very interesting to learn, where it's so, like, it's really a logistics operation. And having, like, there's so much to learn from a well-oiled machine that can then be implemented into an ecosystem as well. Additionally, for myself growing up, like, I always felt like I could do something big, and it just wasn't clear to me how or what I could do. There weren't necessarily the rails by, like, in a game, it's like, oh, I'm going to sign up for this quest and I'm going to do this thing. That doesn't really exist in in real life. And especially in places where there's not a lot of opportunity, like, you don't see those quests. And so that was a very frustrating experience for me, where I felt like I wasn't seen, right? There's an aspect of humanity to this as well, of living up to your potential. And I felt like I was not in a position to be able to do that as well. And so all of these different aspects of having very strong logistics and thinking of how does the Move language go on the conquest of Web3 to secure all of the world's assets, to become the backbone of infrastructure for future coding as a Rust derivative language that has even more optimizations for a lot of, like, particular asset ownership and user experience, consumer oriented things, how everyone can play a different role in this vision, as well as thinking all the way back to, like, those experiences where I felt like I had skill sets and I wasn't in a position to really leverage them or grow them. The same way, people with all kinds of different skill sets find themselves in the same place. And we have an opportunity to do a lot of cool things at the same time, giving them a home, giving them recognition, giving them a piece of this Move language and its future adoption, right? This is something where it's a totally clean slate and a very rare opportunity for us to go from 0 to 1. And I just want to share that mission with as many people as possible. So I really think it comes down to those experiences of, like, gaming and seeing very clear, like, input, output, and kind of being able to think of structures mixed with these really cool books that I read, where one of my favorite classes at Vanderbilt was a philosophy class on games, taught by one of the
So
coolest
cool.
professors there. Dr. Congdon is a beast, just super cool guy, super nice professor, and very, very smart as well. I loved that class, as well as then, my own experiences of, I felt really frustrated that I had a skill set, but I couldn't put it to use. There just wasn't necessarily the opportunity or the path that I could follow. And if you want to win this war, if you want to go on the conquests that Move can do, we all need to be moving in lockstep with one another. And it's by moving in lockstep together and following each of our paths in parallel but in unison that we can really win. And so I truly believe that that's the path to victory, right? I've seen it, I feel it in my heart. And so now it's just about bringing all of that together.
Yeah, I can just say what you said. That's totally what I felt and how I was or how my experience in movement was so far. I mean, it started from designing random stickers to writing some short articles, and now I'm at a podcast, which I wouldn't imagine before. But you kind of trigger those interests, and I think that's a lot about. I mean, you can always read it in incentivized networks or incentivized testnets, but I think it's in this sense more maybe an incentivized community, because it's not just like a monetary reward which you can maybe expect or something, but it's like the community recognition which can give you that incentive. So yeah, that's, I can just say, when that was your plan, I think it worked pretty well. So which leads me to the next question. You already mentioned the community. Maybe can you just describe what is the current state of the movement community? How would you describe it? Do you see um, any strands which are good at the moment, and maybe some space for improvement?
Yeah, so feedback that we get quite often from protocols building on us is they're like, wow, like there's a real community here, right? So it's not just that they're able to onboard lots of folks into their applications and be able to get kind of those lifeline metrics that they need, but it goes so much beyond that, where time and time again, people are like, wow, like this is actually a really quality thread, or this is a really great meme that was designed. All of these different sorts of things, I think, is part of this democratization of Web3, right? It shouldn't have to be said because Web3 should be inherently democratic, but it's actually largely not in a lot of places. And so this starts with us as a team, where we're also a community, where it's very important to us in terms of how we hire folks, that we hire people who can own their vertical, who can be very, very high performing, no egos, so that functionally, like even though at this point we have almost 40 people on the team now, it's a quite flat organization in terms of people having voices, in terms of the respect that we have for one another. And that's something, right? It starts with us, and then it boils down into the community as well, to how not only how we interact and engage with folks, where we're on the it's a level, we're all on the same level here. We're all fighting the same fight for the Move language, and we all play a special role in leading this to victory. And so it's not fair, right, to treat anyone any differently because we are one body. And it's the same with regard to how applications ought be treating one another, ought be treating community members, and how we treat applications building on us as well. So we really want to have this kind of unified, almost like a trinity of you have movement, you have your applications, you have your community, all of which like we're moving in sync, and that's best done by being on the same level. So it's really critical to us as well to be elevating people within our community, so that it's like we can introduce y'all to applications. We can forward your tweets, forward your memes, whatever it is that you're looking to do to these folks. And the way that applications look at that is like they're looking at that like looking at us, because we are one here. And so I think that's an area that, like, honestly, folks, especially guerrilla movers, have truly stepped up. And I think it's really cool that guerrilla movers have provided and taken this framework, this little seed, and grown it to be so much bigger into so much more. And yeah, developing that vision. So now there's more frameworks for people who come to our community and wonder, like, how can I get involved? What can I do? They have a very clear path. And it kind of serves as an accelerator for people in developing their brands, developing their skill sets, and the things that they do, by which then we can connect them to applications, connect them to builders, and start really seeing these network effects. So I think that's the next stage of this, where we have a lot of the pieces in play, and now we're just putting them together. And it takes a lot of trust from everyone's side, where we each have different incentives, we each have different things that we're looking for, and trust one another that we are going to, treat each other kindly and really follow through with those things. But yeah, like I love seeing things like Movecast, meeting builders, like getting to chat with them. I love seeing things of folks who are becoming like guild leaders within Movement, taking their skill sets to applications which they like. And I think the next phase that we're going to see, and where there might be some pain points as well, is like now we're at the part where the puzzle pieces come together. Some of them will fit, some of them won't. Some things, you might have to make them fit and kind of make adjustments on both sides. But I'm really excited to now see applications also stepping up and doing things within the community. Like I've seen so much coming, for example, from the Rise team, of engaging with folks, of giving them ways to get involved, how even making products that are designed for the community to be able to help optimize, some of the things that they might want to do on the testnet. And I love seeing that. And I'm really excited to see where like guild leaders and people who are developing their reputations and identity within Movement will then be doing so within applications as well, and maybe start to call applications home and be able to see recognition from them too. Where I kind of see this as like a kingdom, right? Where there's multiple, each application can be its own kingdom, have its own storyline, have its own games for you to play. And just as kingdoms, some kingdoms might be full of knights, others full of mages, some rogues, shamans, whatever, applications I think ultimately might lean towards different guilds and different skill sets of folks that they look to onboard. And I'm really excited for like those puzzle pieces to find the fit. But within that, like the work is just getting started in terms of making those puzzle pieces fit. And so I think that there's so much to learn from here, right? We're dropouts here. We don't have like a multi-decade long pedigree of doing these sorts of things. We just really know what we feel. We truly believe that it's something that's felt by others all around the world, and we're doing our best to bring it to life. And so that's another reason that it's critical that everyone has a voice and a seat at the table. Like we recognize we're not like the be all end all authority, like not in the slightest. We recognize that each person has their own unique skill set, that they might be better at that one thing than everyone else. And so we want to put them in a position to succeed and put them in a place where they can thrive in that. And so yeah, like there's so that it sounds really cool when you listen to it, but it's like if you want to make that happen, make
It's
like
super hard.
materialize that and have it be a tangible thing can be quite difficult. So I really appreciate as well like all of the feedback that we get in things that we do, all of the feedback that we're getting in terms of like the test net, ways that we can improve it, ways that we can make things better. So that yeah, we're entering this part now where we're going to make the puzzle pieces fit, that will naturally lead to stress, lead to tension. But ultimately, I think that with the respect that we have for one another and with listening to each other's voices, that with time and with keeping at it, things will fall into place. So I'm really excited for that next stage. Like, I think we really have a special sauce and a really unique firepower here. I'm excited for that to be all coming together.
Yeah, and you just mentioned it, the network effects, which you can see, I think, at the moment, pretty nice on the upcoming Parthenon, in which you have the different partners with the different guilds, so everything coming together. So maybe just because you already mentioned before, I would like to dive a little bit deeper into the concepts or the strategies which movement used for building up those community quests, and you said already the guilds. Can you just elaborate a little bit, maybe also in the context of the definite and indefinite games, which you already mentioned before, to give the listeners some idea about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the definition of a finite or definite game is one where it has a defined start and end. It has clearly defined rules, where oftentimes in the rules it tells you how you earn points or how you earn whatever recognition it is. And then it has, in that defined end, there is a clear winner, right? no one can disagree with who the winner is in a finite game. However, in an infinite game or a long-term or indefinite game, it can have a start, but it can't have an end. It doesn't stop. And if the game doesn't end, well, how do you know who the winner is? And if you don't know who the winner is, well, what do points even mean then? So with a short-term game, you can clearly define a lot of things. You can create its own system, right? You can think of it as a box. Within that box, there only can exist so much. Whereas in an infinite game, right, it's more defined by you, the player, what you want to do, what you want to experience. And I think that it's really important to have both, because ultimately with a testnet, right, testnet, it should not last forever. If it lasts forever, like, we're doing something wrong.
Something wrong.
Yeah, so it has to come to an end, which means to create a good experience for folks, it needs to be very clear how to play the game. It needs to be very clear how you're earning points, and what, like, have a very clear, like, input to output. And so within that, right, the way that we think of defining this is by, like, Galaxy, I think, is really cool in being able to set quests and things by which you can judge participation. Because with the short term, you need to have a defined rule set, you need to have a defined point system. Otherwise, it's really difficult to have any clear winner. And if there's no winner, well, it's not really a game, right? If you're not getting some trophy at the end, then why are you playing? It's not really fair to you. So on one side, like, we need to define a very buttoned up and a very, like, defined finite experience for how this works, while simultaneously recognizing that this goes far beyond. Testnet is just the start, right? This isn't the type of protocol where, oh, we do a testnet just so that we can, do a token distribution, and then it's like, oh, we did the thing, guys. Like, let's just wait now. That's all there is to it. No, like, this is serving for the foundation of the growth and adoption of the Move language. This is just the very start. So simultaneously, in the creation of that short-term game, we're thinking of the long-term things that we have in mind. So you can think of it as, like, in a video game where you have your tutorial area, like the very first level, even if it's not a tutorial area, right, is you're going to learn a lot of the different things that you're going to carry with you throughout that game. And so that's been really important for us to define with our short-term testnet, as well as having, like, each application create their quests and the ways in which they're going to be able to recognize, okay, who's contributing to the network in the logic of our guilds, because it serves as the foundation for when we go into mainnet and in the years following, for folks to be able to develop their reputation. So you'll see a lot of quests in guilds, even in different applications, being kind of similar, because they're stemming from the same place and from the same skill sets that you can be developing. And so what's really cool about this is that the short-term game of the testnet aligns and actually transitions very smoothly into the infinite game, which is you building your reputation, you gaining recognition within the community. And what's interesting about that is, for an infinite game, you yourself, the player, define what the rules are. You define what it means to win. You define what a point is. So, for example, if you want, like, you can look at this as careers, for example, where the game, like, first you need to play the game of getting into college, then you play the game of getting into an internship, then you play the game of getting into a job. And what happens if you don't get into the college that you want to, or maybe that's not an opportunity for you? If this is a finite game, it's like, you lose, sorry, it's over. But that's not what it is in reality. Life goes on. And so it's actually, you have the opportunity to either redefine what the game means, or continue playing that game and find a new route where perhaps, for example, like, something, it might be an ultimate end, or it might be a means to an end. It might be a step along the way. And it's on you as a person to define what you want out of this. Just as with this clean slate with the Move language, it's on you to define what you want to get out of it, where you want to grow, where you want to develop. And so then you just keep playing towards that ultimate end where something can be a setback, but it's never an ultimate failure. It can just be a setback. You keep playing. And so the idea here is that within the short term game, you're going to be practicing those skill sets where, for example, like how you got your start creating like sticker packs and creating graphics. That's something that anyone can do as a creator. And maybe they can continue going that route. Maybe they go another, right? They can go wherever they want to with this while still being recognized in this short term game. And so there's something for everyone. And what's important is that you're not making choices. You don't say, okay, do I play red or do I play blue? You can actually do both, and they lend very well towards each other. Playing the short term game is going to set you up for success playing the long term. And playing the long term game, right? If you're gaining this kind of recognition, I can certainly say that you're probably, it's probably going to be very in the interest of folks to recognize you in the short term as well when those things happen. So that's part of the like design of this testnet where there's so much for you to do, and you really get to choose your own adventure, right? Where you don't have to do anything. So it was honestly like really exciting and kind of surprising when we opened up testnet the very first day, and we're like, wow, there's like almost 40 teams here. There's like 300 different quests for people to do. So, that was a huge, overwhelming success on our part. And then the next stage of that and what we're thinking of is now optimizing the short term game more. Because it's pretty fair that if you've never done a testnet before, you come to here, you see 300 different things, you're like, where do I even start? So we're working on some ways that we can help improve the short-term game as well, so it can be more clear where you stand within the game that's being played and have clear kind of levels to it. Honestly, a lot of inspiration was taken from Elden Ring. That is my favorite game of all time. I freaking love it. And what's really cool about it is that there is no there's no instructions, right? You spot when I first played Elden Ring, I quit after an hour because I was like, okay, what the heck am I even doing here? And when I re-downloaded it, I was like, okay, I'm just going to put myself in the mindset and start like not trying to play the game based on my own understanding, but rather play the game by the way that the the layout and the resources have been set aside before me. So playing it in line with how the game was designed, that I started to have so much fun because you explore. And as you're exploring, oh, you find a random cave. And that cave, right, there's a boss in it. You get a new item. Or maybe you find like a town and there's a quest for you to do. And maybe it leads to a boss, like a larger, like an actual boss, not just like a mini boss. And my favorite part, my truly favorite part of Elden Ring is when you're just exploring a random forest and you find a well and you're like, oh, let's check this out. What could be down here? And then suddenly you're in an entirely new area that's the size of the map that you just came from. And so that's really the experience that like we wanted to create for our test net, where the idea is that you get to be exposed to these different styles of play, these different skill sets for each one of the guilds. And things might start with you do a quest where you create a sticker pack for a team, and maybe you get right. Who knows where things can go from that. Like from your story, like you've come so far and done so many cool things, and in many ways, this is just the start of another story. And so that's really the experience that we want to have for folks. But yeah, at the same time, we're always looking to improve. And so taking the very valid feedback that there's so much people are kind of lost in a lot of ways to be able to improve in that short-term game as well. So kind of firing on all cylinders and creating an alignment of this, where what's really like the critical thing is that by playing one game, you're not getting locked out necessarily of the other, but they can instead serve as a foundation for you. Kind of like how when you're practicing martial arts, right? You're doing certain motions, you're doing certain things. It's like, why am I doing this? It's like, patience, Daniel-san, right? Like, it leads to something so much bigger. And that's ultimately like the first step to us of helping people get these skill sets that we believe they should have, helping them grow their skill sets and become a part of this mover army that we have, that we're building together. And then at the same time, throughout it, recognizing both the qualitative and the quantitative ways that people contribute, having applications do the exact same thing, recognizing both the qualitative and the quantitative, and ultimately like putting this in the hands of the end person who's playing and testing things with this, where we're not asking them to play a very rigid, like, these are the rules, you have to do this or you're out, but rather just giving them all of the puzzle pieces where you can put this together however you envision it. But that's ultimately like one of the reasons we were founded as well. Because when we were first building with Move, it was very rigid. If you want to build with Move, there's like two places you can do it. And that's going to have significant implications for everything that follows. It's like a square one, and it's like it determines the direction that you walk in. It cuts you off from a lot of different things and limits the amount of things that you are able to do. Whereas our vision for the Move language is like, look, we just want people to build with Move. We don't care where they do it. Like, we're not going to ask them to do, we don't want to force them to use like different wallets, to use different infrastructure and all of these like changes. We just want them to purely be able to build with this language and do the things that they want to do. So similarly with our testnet, whether you're looking to purely play a short-term game, maybe you play the short-term game and that actually onboards you into an infinite one, or maybe you're looking to play a much longer-term game of like, okay, I really want to cement myself in this network because it's a very rare opportunity, right? We haven't launched yet. We're still quite early. So it's like if you were one of the first people in Solana, for example, right? Imagine what you'd be able to do in terms of if you want to podcast, if you want to be a KOL, you want to be like a threader, any of the things that you want to do. So that's really the vision that we had when it came to building this testnet experience, where we do both optimally and in the best way that we can, but they actually have a lot of overlap and synergies with one another, and most importantly, it serves as a foundation for the overall growth of the network and the many things we want to do in the future.
Yeah, it feels so heartwarming to listen to your like vision and ideas which were, and to see how it evolved now from the last weeks and months. So yeah, actually, if I think about crypto, is for me something like a very big mix of very different topics, from technology, finance, but also community and, as you said, game theory. And after today, it's also some philosophy, I think. So yeah, when you think about like in real life, I think there are very many parallels and same things which you will realize and experience. So yeah, kind of movement. They were successfully to give a home to those feelings and experiences. So as I mentioned before, it's like an open world game where you just start and then you can just look and try out. And at the moment where you think, okay, that's cool, I will try it, and if it's fun, you go on with that. And I think that's a pretty awesome platform which you created for the community, I would say.
Thank you. I like how you described it as a philosophy as well, because it really is a way of life. Like so
Yeah,
many of us from around the world, especially like young adults, and even more so like kids, like in a lot of ways we've been left behind and not even really considered. where the only consideration is like, okay, how do I extract as much value from these people as I can? And it's really not fair. And as we see when we look around, it's leading to pretty catastrophic consequences for the lives of most people around the world. And crypto is a very rare opportunity to be able to build your own seat at the table, where you don't need the kind of recognition that only comes when like you're related to a senator or to like an executive, or have like access to those people, because you don't need access to anything but an internet connection, and still to some degree speaking English, where that's something where like I hope as AI progresses that too can be democratized as well. But yeah, it makes it a much more equitable system, and is a very rare opportunity to be able to find your footing. What's really, really cool is that in Web3, and especially at Movement, it's something that we're doing together, right? It's the kind, we only win if we all win. If, right? So it's a very unique opportunity to be a part of. And that's what it's all about to us. It really is like a way of life, and taking a big bet on this for our futures, the futures of our families, and for really, creating a system that could make a better world.
Absolutely. So maybe one last question before we head over to the community questions is maybe which long-term vision do you have on the movement itself? Do you think, I mean, you mentioned before you want to make Move accessible to everyone, but do you also have some ideas how to onboard other ecosystems? Is that a plan at all? Is it do you want to adopt mainstream? Can you say something about that?
Yeah. I mean, our vision is that just as Solidity is the standard for smart contract development right now, in the future, it should be the Move language. And a vision that it's not just using Web3, we're actually seeing a lot of folks building kind of Web 2.5 applications with the Move language, specifically like consumer oriented applications. So I'm really excited to see Move breaking into kind of Web 2 spaces as well. It's coming for everything. So I think there's really high ceiling for what's going to be possible with Move, and yeah, envision it being everywhere. I think one other
Super
part
cool.
is that I envision like all of the folks who are putting in time and energy into the movement, that they too are elevated accordingly to the adoption and to the growth of the Move language and to the growth of movement. Where this is the kind of thing like, right, I'd love to have like top podcasts, top KOLs, folks that are recognized, kind of how we recognize certain names and certain brands, even in different across different ecosystems. That's the same kind of recognition that I want to see within the movement as well. And hopefully have this be means for a lot of people around the world to find financial freedom, to be empowered, be able to take care of themselves, take care of their families. And I hope that on the other side, once we make it, that we can work together to change the world in kind of more hands-on ways, because it's critical that you get your oxygen mask on first. But like I'm super excited for when we can create like Move decentralized physical infrastructure that's providing internet, providing clean water, and other access to technologies for people around the world. I'm excited for folks who might be politically minded to be really like on now that they're taken care of, and they don't need to worry about where their next paycheck is coming from or how they're going to take care of their families, that they can focus on bettering their communities. So there's multiple levels to this movement as well. And I see that as being one of the long-term ones as well, where it's a lifelong community of people who are bound by this philosophy and this like shared belief system, that we can work together to change the world in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, that's super cool and super exciting to be part of it. And I can just mirror from my life. Yeah, both the movement and Gorilla Movers are such a huge part of my life in the meanwhile. And I really love to just go on the Discord, see people which I never saw in life. Okay, some I already met, like on ECC and stuff, but if I wouldn't have gone to such an event, I would spend a lot of time of my life talking to some guys which I would never met. So yeah, it feels good to have such a home and such a community to be in. And yeah, in the future we are setting up some local meetups, and yeah, I think that's putting the community even stronger together. And as I mentioned before, I also want to give the community the chance to get their voice heard. So I brought some questions from the community to you. So the first one is from the Gorilla Movers itself. Which significance do Gorilla Movers have for the community now and for the future? And how can we make even more impact?
Yeah. So when I think of Gorilla Movers, I think of like what's really cool is that it's like the top tier, but it's a very accessible top tier. It's not top tier in the sense of like when we think of universities or when we think of careers, where that's very, very inaccessible for folks and it's not really fair the way that you get into them. But with the Gorilla Movers, it's something that anyone can access. It's like a top tier of ethos and energy that is held. So it's something that honestly inspires me. And in a lot of days where like I might be tired or exhausted, like this is what I do it for. It gives me the energy that I need to go on. So I absolutely love this concept, like self-selecting of like being the energy and the life force of the movement and growing this pie where it's not like, oh, we're better than you guys. Like, no, come join us. Like, that's the energy that I absolutely love to see. And honestly, would love to see that continue growing. So, with movers being in Gorilla Movers specifically being the energy of the movement, I think the next phase of this, like, I love movers following movers, movers engaging with movers to where it's not just like silos of like, right, but actually creating webs and network effects. And the next step is to then share that same love with protocols building on us, with the founders building on us. And just as right now, protocols and founders, they're talking to each other more, engaging with each other more, both in terms of like conversations on Telegram, but also on Twitter, to where ultimately like we together can create critical mass of breaking out of like our own siloed Twitter algorithm and sharing this love and sharing this community with others and creating like a very cohesive ecosystem. So I think that's one of the big next stage. Like one of the big next stages is like like engaging with teams, engaging with like others, and especially with one another. So break out of the silo, share the love with as many people as you can. Another thing is holding events. Like we love community events. It's incredible to see folks like putting these on even without us even knowing, and we're just like, oh no way, like that's so cool. So now that's something that we're moving into as well, where if you want to hold an event, it's as simple as, right, you reach out to a venue and a caterer where it's like, hey, get me an invoice for me to rent this space, get me an invoice to make like this much food for this much people. And then you can submit that to us and our team. We can review, get back to you pretty quickly on if there's feedback on the budget you're requesting or if it's good. And then we can just pay those vendors directly for you. So kind of very simple, like you don't have to worry about like the money side of things. We want to cover that for you as well as to send merch to y'all. We just would love to see more community events happening as well and would really encourage Gorilla Movers to step up in that sense for their region, share it to more people around them. And yeah, we want to get you merch. We want to help elevate you in that sense too. And that's going to be a really key thing that as we go into mainnet, we're going to give a special focus for recognizing. This is one of the unique areas in which like it's happening on movement. It's not happening a lot of other places. So we just want to double down with that and keep supporting folks for putting those events on. And then I think the last piece of it, it kind of ties to engaging with applications, is like everything that you're doing for movement to continue doing in apps as well. when you do this in apps, we're going to see this as well, right? We're keeping in touch with applications about who they're recognizing and giving recognition to. And ultimately, that's going to play quite a large factor too in how, right, we go about this, where that's kind of how our testnet's designed, that you earn recognition from us by being recognized by others and setting a very clear framework for that. So I think those are the three main things, like sharing the energy with others, particularly on Twitter, holding in-person events, and like for that we'll be sending out a forum. You can also get in touch with our mod team and they can direct you to the forum and get you in touch with our team as well for holding those events. And then lastly, everything that you're doing right now, keep doing, and keep doing in applications too, because we see it even beyond just like number of quests and number of transactions. Although those are two distinct separate buckets which you can earn recognition from, we're also seeing this qualitative too, and that's really important to us.
Conehead, he asks if you are happy how the chain holds up so far, and did you realize any surprises so far?
Yeah, lots of surprises. Uh, Honestly, it was really cool that we broke Discord and Galaxy before we broke the chain. The chain has been getting just absolutely now the chain is it's getting wrecked. So y'all are crushing it. Y'all managed to break the chain. And one interesting thing to note, we actually have three chains. We have an EVM chain, an Aptos chain, and a Sweet chain. And so all like these are all just getting terminated, giving us a lot that we can fix and improve, as well as seeing like how there's so many questions, so much for people to do, and where we can kind of like in my Elden Ring experience, I played for an hour, I got overwhelmed, I quit, and ultimately, like I came back and it ended up being my favorite game of all time. But what if I didn't? And so we're going to be doing things that are going to help others with that sense as well.
Okay, cool. The next question is from 0xm1m3, which connects to the last question. What are your personal experiences with the testnet so far? Are you playing around somehow?
Yeah, yeah. So that's been like that's part of kind of, I guess, some alpha, right? We're trying a lot of the protocols, we're trying a lot of the quests as well to see what works, what doesn't. And that's part of making this more structured kind of paths for each of the different guilds and this more bite-sized way to engage with the test net. So man, it's crazy. It's been really fun working with our team as well, because what we've been able to do is leverage a 24-hour work cycle where people are sourcing like separately, like I'm sourcing feedback, I'm communicating that feedback to each of the different teams, and then logging that. And then when I go to bed, our Asia team, they wake up, they see what I did, the feedback I logged, where I'm at with helping each of the partners make these fixes, bugs, whatnot, improve, and they can drive it the rest of the way, report back, hand me like, okay, this is your next. It feels really good passing that baton, you know, within the team. And I think it's been really cool getting feedback as well from the community on what they like and what they don't like. So yeah, it's been a really fun experience. One, like playing with the test net and being like, wow, like I made this, like this is the game being played. But also just constantly like finding ways that we can improve the user experience, whether it's from the applications, like the front ends, whether it's the Galaxy quests, whether it's the way that they are like engaging with the testnet themselves. So yeah, and even looking at it, like there's so much that we plan to do. Like you're seeing a lot of like the pieces from day one, and I think it's gonna be really cool to see how they develop over time.
Yeah, that's a really nice experience, how fast the UX is. So happy to see which other UX improvements you might bring. Um, so the next question is, we have two left. One from PT. He asks, what are your plans for attracting users from other chains?
Yeah, so a movement's a relatively agnostic experience for folks on Ethereum. where you can just pretty simply come over. For folks that are not on EVM-based chains, I think people are going to see the quality of applications, the quality of our community, as well as the wave that we're making with the Move language. So bringing a lot of folks on, I mean, even looking at Rust ecosystems, it's pretty similar to Move as well. And so we see a lot of developers coming from there too. But ultimately, I think if we keep focusing on our community, keep focusing on the experience of our testnet, and keep focusing on building a high quality chain coming to market, people are going to see that and have good reason to come and be a part of it.
Okay, very cool. And the last question is from our OG Ethics. What is the collaborative process between you and Rushi? Maybe one of you comes up with ideas while the other focuses more on dev work. So which aspects of the projects do you focus more on, and which does Rushi focus more on? And to summarize the question, who fits where?
Okay, firstly, shout out Ethics. I was following that guide that you made for integrating the Razor wallet, and that's been tremendously helpful for so many people around. So thank you, firstly, for making that, as well as all of the other awesome stuff that you've been doing. What's really cool about like Rushi and I is that, like, as co-founders, we share a similar ethos and a vision and a drive, but our personalities, the things that we find interesting, are totally, like, in many ways, we're quite different. And that proves to be a very synergistic and very complementary fit for creating a company, for doing all of the things that are necessary there, as well as for like leading the team, setting the vision, all of this really good stuff. So I'd say that generally, like, I'm much more introverted and Rushi is much more extroverted. So in a lot of ways, we do things kind of like internal versus external. But of course, there's internal things that he does and external things that I do as well. But generally, we're able to rely on each other. Like, and that's what's really important, just having a significant degree of trust here with folks and being able to rely on him, being able to just feel really confident in that. And that's kind of where this idea of people owning their vertical stems from, in which, like, that's what we ourselves are doing, and it kind of it just resonates all throughout. So yeah, really good question. And if you're ever wanting to start a company or do a startup, that's something that I really highly recommend, to find a co-founder where you have a similar vision and ethos and drive, but you have different skill sets. You have different things that you find interesting and different personalities, because having a complementary fit is really critical, especially in those early stages. And it also means that it's like there's very rarely overlap. Like sometimes there is, especially like for like critical things, for example, but largely we're able to pretty well divide and conquer.
Okay, thank you. So we just got a little short questions from the Gorilla Movers intern. He asks, how many bananas do you eat each day to hold your potassium levels high?
Hell yeah! No, honestly, this was such an honor to be a part of. Really great questions from an equally great, if not greater, community. And yeah, thank you so much, Sadam. This was an honor to be a part of.
It was very, very fun and a huge honor to have you on the podcast. And I wish you the very best for the future. And I think the community is very, very excited what is coming up. We got the gift of the Parthenon, which we have now, which we can play at. And yeah, I would say G-Move and Waza Waza.
We're just getting started, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.